Week number 11 of the 2025 fantasy football season is right around the corner. We have two teams on bye this week, the Saints and the Indianapolis Colts. And in today's video, I'm going to help you guys set your lineups for week number 11 at the wide receiver position. We're going to be going in depth through every single matchup from Thursday Night Football all the way through Monday Night Football and tell you guys whether I believe you should start or sit the wide receivers in all of those games, as well as where I believe they'll finish by the end of the week. Before we can get into things, though, I would like to ask that if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. We begin with Thursday Night Football, the New York Jumbo Jets at the New England Patriots. Now, Kayshon Boutte was limited in practice yesterday with the hamstring injury. This is a short week, so the expectation would be that he does end up missing, meaning that we should see more Stefon Diggs. Now, he is still yet to truly see 70+% of the snaps, which is very frustrating if you are a Stefon Diggs owner. The guy scored a touchdown now in 3 straight games. Last week at Tampa, 5 receptions on 8 targets for 46 yards. With that touchdown, this should be a bad game script, though, as I do expect them to be up big on the Jets. So to me, he is just a low-end wide receiver number 2. Now, for the other wide receivers, Matt Collins had 6 receptions on 10 targets for 106 yards, and people are going to try and chase that big game. They're going to be like, wow, I just saw what Matt Collins did. I can't wait to start him up against the Jets, and they're going to get all giddy like their name was Josh to play him, but we saw him be the wide receiver 15 back in week number 8, and the very next game he scores 2.9 PPR points, so I would not be rostering him. I'm not going to fall for that trap. DeMario time. I thought it was DeMario time last week, but he didn't even see his snaps increase without Kayshon Boutte. He was the wide receiver 55. I'm not going to be playing him. Now, I do think Adonai Mitchell is worthy of a speculative add, as while Garrett Wilson is out, he should be the best wide receiver on paper on this team. But ultimately, even if he does suit up this week up against the Patriots, who are the 13th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis, I would still have no confidence in playing him due to snap restrictions, as well as the fact that Justin Fields is just terrible. So none of these wide receivers on the Jets should be able to be guys that you can actually consider as start worthy. Now we move to Madrid, Espanyol, Spain, Sunday, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The left hands up. Who are we? The Commanders at the Miami Dolphins, the greatest football team. Jalen Waddle away, Waddle. Ever since Tyreek Hill got hurt, Jalen Waddle has gone insane in the membrane. In 6 games without Tyreek Hill, he has been a top 18 wide receiver in 4 of those games and had just 1 game where he truly went bust, which was that awful weather game in Cleveland. Last week up against the Bills, Waddle does what he always does up against the Buffalo Bills, and he waddles away, waddle, right into the end zone with 5 receptions on 7 targets for 84 yards and a touchdown up against a Commanders defense that's going to be holding on for dear life in Spain and allow the 3rd most points to wide receivers on a per game basis. I expect a low-end wide receiver 1 finish this week out of the Penguin. Now, I am as much of a Malik Washington fan as it gets, and the touchdown he caught that was a dime by Tua was just phenomenal, but with just 1 game over 10 points this season, even in a wet dream spot, he has just 3 targets in back-to-back games. I don't think you can reasonably start him even in a great spot. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is about as useful as a boxing glove in a shootout, so he should be on your waivers. For the Washington Commanders, without Jaden Stormy Daniels, the juice in this offense has went straight down the drain. Debo is the clear wide receiver 1 as Terry McLaurin is out yet again, but being the wide receiver 1 on a burning ship isn't necessarily the most ideal thing either. 4 receptions on 5 targets for 29 yards and a touchdown last week. The Dolphins are a bad matchup for wide receivers, allowing the 4th fewest amount of points weekly to wide receivers. This game does have a high total at 47.5, so maybe Debo pulls the rabbit out the hat here and has the big game, but to be honest with you, I feel pretty meh about Debo Samuel. I just don't love it. He is a low-end wide receiver 3 for me. Jalen, stay in your lane. Chris Moore in this spot up against the Dolphins. I just don't feel confident at all rolling out any non-Debo wide receiver without Jaden Daniels, and honestly, I wouldn't even bother rostering any of these guys. Now we move to the Carolina Panthers at the Atlanta Falcons, the beginning of the 1 p.m. slate on Sunday. Now, Tedero McMillan at this point in the season is just mid. He himself is a very talented player, but when you see the quarterback play here, that is just as putrid as it gets with Bryce Young. How can I possibly give this guy the Gawk Gawk 9000 special and actually rank him as a start? Now, I fully understand that if they were to get a better quarterback, or if Bryce Young goes back to the end of last season, then we would see Tyrone McMillan potentially become a league winner. So he is a talented enough player to score 20 plus fantasy points, but when the quarterback play that he has at his disposal right now, he is just a low-end wide receiver 3, especially considering this is the 25th best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. For the Carolina Panthers, the other wide receivers, I still believe heavily in Jalen Coker, but again, with Bryce Young playing how he is playing, you can't afford to start any non-T-Mac wide receiver in the Panthers offense, meaning you have to sit Leggett as well, who seemingly has become the wide receiver 3 option in terms of targets, as he is now behind Jalen Coker. For the Atlanta Falcons, Drake London may have been my best call of the summer. I came on camera basically every single day this August, and I hit this guy with the metaphorical sukalamink. I was talking him up so heavily, banging the drum for him weekly. I talked about how him and Michael Penix have a great connection from the end of last season, and how that will all lead to Drake London dominating 50 Shades of Grey style this season. And boy, oh boy, have I been right. This motherfucker has been the wide receiver 1 in 3 of the last 4 games. Not a wide receiver 1, meaning he's been a top 12 wide receiver. The wide receiver 1. The number 1 wide receiver overall in 3 of the last 4 games he has played. This dude is carrying all of my fantasy teams on his back, and I absolutely love it. And I love it. Shout out to FaZe Adapt. Last week, 6 receptions on 8 targets for 104 yards and a touchdown in Germany. The Panthers are the 28th best matchup for a wide receiver, so I understand, oh my god, we gotta panic. I mean, Drake London is Drake London. He deserves his crown as a must-start top 6 option this week. For Darnell, here comes the Mooney. He had 8 targets last week for 1 reception and 17 yards, just 3 total catches over the last 3 weeks. Unstartable and unrosterable. And if I'm not playing Darnell Mooney, you certainly are not starting or rostering Giants legend David Sills V. Now we move to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Buffalo Bills, which in my opinion is the game I am most excited about this week. Before we break down this game in depth at the wide receiver position, as well as the rest of the games on the Week 11 slate, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our partner over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog and sign up using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description, you will get a free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus funds. As well, if you play $5 in the pick'em, you receive an additional $100 in bonus funds or in bonus entries. How does the pick'em work? It is incredibly simple. You make at least 2 picks on the higher or the lower. If those picks hit, you get paid. If you do multiple other picks, then the payout will be higher, but all of the picks need to hit. Make sure you guys do check that out. Promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description. Now, the Buccaneers at the Buffalo Bills. No one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. While Emeka Egbuka was down bad in the 3 games prior to the bye, he arose following the bye week up against the Patriots. 6 receptions on 13 targets for 115 yards and a touchdown as the wide receiver 3. Baker looked far better as well, as he was playing significantly worse in the 2 games prior to the bye week as well. Against the Buffalo Bills, who allowed the 19th most points to wide receivers on a per game basis, Egbuka is a must-start top 10 wide receiver this week in what may be the highest scoring game on week number 11. Tez Johnson, just like Emeka Egbuka, was eating up against the Patriots, and Bro's plate was cleared. 4 receptions on 5 targets for 42 yards and 2 touchdowns as the wide receiver number 10. The Tasmanian Devil is the clear wide receiver 2 on the Buccaneers until Mike Evans or Chris Godwin return, meaning that in an offense with as much upside as the Bucs, you are going to want this guy in your lineup. While he may not see the most consistent basis of targets, 5+ in 3 straight games, I got him as a high-end wide receiver number 3. With Tez Johnson playing so well, Sterling Shepard should not be rostered, as he isn't even guaranteed to get 4 targets. For the Buffalo Bills, Khalil, Shakira, oh baby, when you talk like that, you make a woman go mad, is the poster boy of mid-range wide receiver 3s. He will get you 10 to 14 points every single week, and you'll be happy about it. Sure, we have seen some bigger games than that, but more than likely, he is just a safe bet for you weekly. He probably will not win you your matchup, but he also probably won't sink your team's battleship. Last week in Miami, 7 receptions on 9 targets for 58 yards as the wide receiver 29, 7+ targets in 3 straight games. Like I said earlier, he's a mid-range wide receiver 3 3 in the 14th best matchup for wide receivers. Now, it was very clear last week that Josh Allen loves him some Keon Coleman. He was 3 of 8 for 46 yards and a touchdown as the wide receiver 26. But at the end of the day, won a right game after the 7 games prior to that being absolutely disgusting. That just doesn't make me want to play him. Any non-Khalil Shakir piece is unstartable in this Bills wide receiver core, meaning you are sitting Elijah Moore as well. Now we got the Houston Texans at the Tennessee Titans. Is Davis Mills better than CJ Stroud? A lot of people are saying. I am only kidding, obviously, right? Of course, CJ Stroud is better than Giraffe Man Davis Mills, but man, oh man, did Davis Mills love him some Nico Collins. Bro pulled a Joe Flacco and just forced him the ball. 7 receptions on 15 targets for 136 yards as the wide receiver 5 up against the Jaguars. As of right now, we are still unsure if Stroud will play or not, but I would lean towards it being no, as he is still in the concussion protocol, but it is still just Wednesday. Regardless, though, you are certainly starting him up against the Titans, who allow the 9th most points to wide receivers on a per-game basis as a low-end wide receiver number 1. Now, I loved what I saw out of Jaden Higgins last week with 5 receptions on 7 targets for 42 yards and a touchdown as the wide receiver 22. And I also loved what I saw in week number 8. But after that big week 8 game, he shit the bed with just 1.4 PPR points in the next game. The matchup here is great for Higgins. So if you are in a pickle and you have to play him, I think there are far worse options. But for me, I would like to see more of him before just jolting him into my lineup, even in a good spot here. Christian Kirk never really found his footing as a Houston Texan, which may be due to him just being banged up. So for a guy that hasn't really done anything this season, I don't think he should be on your fantasy team, especially with the rise up of Jaden Higgins. For the Titans, Shamir DK is the wide receiver 1 on the Titans. Even with Ridley practicing today, I still think Shamir will continue to be the wide receiver number 1. And we saw that run from week 7 and 8 where he was a top 16 wide receiver. And I think he still has that upside, but against the Texans defense, that is the 6th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. I just don't really see this being the game where he claims that former glory from a couple of weeks ago. Calvin Ridley has just been awful this season. I love Calvin Ridley. I've been a Calvin Ridley truther for a long time, but there is just really nothing relatively positive that I could actually say surrounding his season so far. Even if he does suit up, this is a rough matchup, so there's no reason to roll the dice on it. Io Manor will always have that 2-game stretch in weeks 2 and 3 where he looked like he could become an every week starter for your fantasy team potentially. Since then, he has failed to score 10 points in all 6 games. Leave him on your waiver. And ultimately, again, while I still really do like Shamir, if Cam Ward's playing like this in such a dog shit matchup, how do we really think this is going to go? It's not going to go great. It's going to go poorly for your fantasy team. Now we move to the Chicago Bears at the cold like Minnesota Vikings. Now we currently have nothing on DJ Moore's shoulder injury. I do assume he is back, but it isn't really safe to assume anything in the NFL. Last week, Adunze put belt to ass of the Giants with 6 receptions on 10 targets for 86 yards and a tug. As long as Caleb just fucking throws the ball to this guy 8 times, he is going to go ballistic. It still, to me, makes 0 sense why the team just magically gets away from him. He is the best wide receiver on this team by far. By a quarter mile. And still, we get games like week 9 where he has 3 fucking targets for 0 receptions. Now, I get this is a rough matchup up against the Vikings, the 26th best matchup for wide receivers. So I do have to knock Rome down from being like a low-end wide receiver 1 to a high-end wide receiver 2, but you are still certainly going to be starting him. Wiki, DJ Moore played through the shoulder injury last week and was held to 0 fantasy points. If he is back, if you have to start him, I get it, but he has been bad for a lot of this season, and the matchup here is also rough, so I would stay away. Olamide Zaccheaus and Luther Burden receive a bump up if DJ Moore is out, but still not solid enough of a bump for me to actually play him. For the Minnesota Vikings, Justin Jefferson has really pissed me off this season, and it isn't his fault at all. It's just these bum quarterbacks in Minnesota. 4 receptions on 12 targets last week for 37 yards. 12 fucking targets and only 4 receptions. Come on, man. The week prior, he was 6 of 9. Very nice. I like for 47 yards and a touchdown as the wide receiver 18 up against Detroit. In the 4th best matchup for wide receivers, you got to have Jefferson as a top 12 option. Jordan Addison Ray is also a victim of that nine fella, JJ McCarthy, that they have playing quarterback. 11 targets last week for 3 receptions because the ball is shaking more than some ass at the club when no hands comes on for 35 yards. Back-to-back finishes outside the top 40 with JJ McCarthy under center, which is just fucking disgusting. But the matchup here is great, so he's a mid-range wide receiver number 3. Jalen Naylor, I barely knew her. Had the Ravens defense calling him daddy last week. 5 receptions on 6 targets for 124 yards and a touchdown. Some may fall for this very clear trap, though. It's like a mouse run into the cheese just to get sent to the shadow realm. It's the same case with Mac Hollins. No need to play the wide receiver 3 in an offense that's quarterbacked by JJ McCarthy. That also has Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison in it. Now we move to the Green Bay Packers at the New York Football Giants, and thank the football gods above that famous Jameis eat a W Winston is under center this week without Jackson Dart. And that at least gives me some hope that this game won't put me straight to sleep like the Packers game last week. Call it NyQuil. Jameis will be heaving that thing in this game, and it will probably be very fun to watch. Will that lead to him having a great fantasy day? Maybe, maybe not. Will that lead to Wan'Dale Robinson actually producing in fantasy? We shall see, but at least it's better than having Mr. Unlimited Russell Wilson under center. 11 targets in back-to-back games for Wan'Dale. He should be at least a safe mid-range wide receiver 3. Darius Slayton is in that YOLO wide receiver 4, break glass in case of emergency tier. In the 21st best matchup for wide receiver. Last week, he was 4 for 4 like he was at Wendy's in Chicago for 89 yards. This is a guy, though, that does have feet for hands with brutal drops in a lot of games this season. But with Jameis Winston, maybe he shines here. He shines bright like a diamond. Back-to-back games with 11-plus PPR points. Then we got Ray McLeod, who has just 1 target in his 2 starts on the Giants. No need to roster him, even with the Jameis Winston under center. For the Green Bay Packers, Romeo Doubs hurt his chest on Monday Night Football. Maybe he should have worn a Guardian cap on his chest. I saw a bunch of those memes on Twitter because we all know he's the guy with the fucking gigantic helmet. And you know what? I'm not making fun of you for wearing a Guardian cap, by the way, Romeo Doubs, if you're watching this. Be as safe as possible. That's fine with me. I just always think it just looks a little bit funny, especially when they have like those old throwback uniforms on. It just looks funny, okay? Sue me, okay? Don't actually sue me. I don't have enough money for a lawyer. If he plays this week, I would play him as a low-end wide receiver 3, but we have very little information right now. Prior to last week's boring-ass game up against the Eagles, he was a top 30 wide receiver in 4 of the last 5 games. So in the 7th best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis, he belongs as a low-end wide receiver number 3. If Romeo Doubs is out, Christian Watson would slot into that wide receiver 3 range, the low-end wide receiver 3. The problem with starting him if Doubs plays is he's had 4 targets in 3 straight games. It is hard to get up and be excited to start a guy who isn't getting more than 4 targets, even with his snaps increasing weekly. Matthew Golden-Scar missed last week with a shoulder injury after being limited in practice once last week. If he is able to go, he is a sit whether Doubs plays or not, as would Dontavion John Wicks if Golden is out. Now we got the Cincinnati Bengals at the Pittsburgh Steelers, the icy hot bowl. Number 2, the second one of the season, the Cincinnati Bengals at the Pittsburgh Steelers, the battle of the Unks. Jamar Chase ripped the Steelers a new one back in week number 7. 16 receptions on 23 targets for 161 yards and a touchdown as the wide receiver 1. While I do not expect him to get 23 targets again, anything is possible with Unk Joe Flacco under center. While Jamar Chase slowed down slightly before the bye as the wide receiver 16 against Chicago, full steam ahead for him up against the Steelers in the second best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. He is my wide receiver number 1 this week. Last time out up against the Steelers, Higgins joined in on taking the Steelers defense straight to Pound Town. Him and Jamar formed an Eiffel Tower over that defense. Wide receiver 13 with 6 receptions on 10 targets for 96 yards and a touchdown. 1 or more touchdown in 3 straight games. In such a wet dream matchup, he is a high-end wide receiver number 2 for me on the week. Now, Andre Yoshi Voss looked great prior to the bye up against the Bears with 5 receptions on 7 targets for 66 yards and a touchdown as the wide receiver 13. But as we always say, a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while, and the odds of that actually happening again with Chase and Higgins healthy is very low. Leave him on your waivers. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, DK Metcalf has been struggling big time over the last 2 weeks with less than 7 points in both games. 3 receptions on 7 targets last week in LA up against the Chargers for 35 yards as the wide receiver 49. If there ever was a game to get him back on track, It would be here, though, in the 15th best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. Last time these two teams played was a dud for Metcalf, 3 receptions on 5 targets for 50 yards as the wide receiver 4. And while he has been very, very, very frustrating, again, the matchup kind of carves the path out for him to be a low-end wide receiver 2 at least. Every few weeks, Calvin Austin's going to pop off, and then the very next game, he's going to be silent like the night Santa comes. Even with 6+ targets in 3 straight games, I'm not interested in playing him. Ben Skoranek barely even plays. He has 3 targets on the season. No need to even discuss him. Now we got the LA Superchargers at the Jacksonville Jaguars in Duval. Ladd McConkey is a must-start wide receiver week in and week out. 4 receptions on 6 targets for 107 yards and a touchdown as the wide receiver 7. Last week, he started to really rise to the top ever since Joe Alt got hurt. His terrible start to the season is just behind him at this point. You got to really bang the drum for this guy in the 10th best matchup for wide receivers as a low-end wide receiver number 1, with Keenan Allen falling apart like that Post Malone song. Quentin Johnston has quickly become a hotter commodity in this offense. 5 receptions on 10 targets last week for 42 yards. Still far from being like that safety blanket that we had with him earlier on the season through the first 4 games. But at the end of the day, in such a delightful matchup, he is a low-end wide receiver too. Now, if Aaron Gadsden ends up missing, I would definitely feel better about Keenan. Keenan has failed to score 10 points in 3 straight games. I still think Keenan has that big upside weekly, and we have seen him smash 4 different times this season. But outside of those smashes, you're kind of just left with crumbs. You're kind of just left with him completely fucking your team directly in the ass. In a great matchup, he is in a break glass in case of emergency wide receiver 4 type of range. For the Jaguars, BTJ was on the practice field on Wednesday. He is suffering. He's dealing with, he suffered. I guess he's not suffering still. Maybe he is. I don't know. I'm not his fucking doctor. He suffered a low-grade high ankle sprain in week number 9 and missed last week after not practicing all week. I wouldn't lock him in as a must start, but if he does play in this brutal matchup, that's the 2nd worst matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis, I would have him as a wide receiver 3. If he is out, Parker Washington would be in the YOLO start wide receiver 4 range. Last week, I didn't think he would smash, right? He was in a rough spot up against the Texans, and he did. He was great. But again, that kind of felt a little bit fugazi. 3 receptions on 7 targets for 33 yards and a touchdown. And he also had that punt return touchdown. This matchup is also brutal, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt due to how many targets he gets. So it's okay if you have to start him. Jacoby Myers doesn't do much in his debut with the Jaguars on a short week. Just 44% of the snaps, going 3 for 3 like a free throw for 41 yards. I expect more usage for him going forward, but in a rough matchup, I would stay away. Diami Brown is about as useful as a hole in the head, so you would leave him on your waivers. For the Seahawks at the LA Rams, the beginning of the 4 p.m. slate on Sunday, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below if you have enjoyed thus far. JSN is a locked and loaded top 12 option weekly. Just 2 games outside the top 12 this season out of 9 starts. 5 straight games as a top 9 wide receiver. Last week, up against the Arizona Cardinals in a game where the team barely even threw the ball due to how strong the defense played, he was still 5 of 6 for 93 yards and the touchdown as the wide receiver 9, playing only 42% of the snaps. So in the 17th best matchup for wide receivers this week, he is a top 3 wide receiver for me, and he is my wide receiver number 2. Just like JSN, Puka Nacua is a clear top 12 option every single week. Just 6 of 8 games inside of the top 12, just as if that's like a bad thing. So just 2 of 8 games outside of the top 12. Last week, he was the wide receiver 16 with 5 receptions on 6 targets for 64 yards. Shout out to Nintendo. And a touchdown. And while this is not a great matchup, it's the 24th best matchup for wide receivers, you're not going to do anything besides throw this man into your lineup with a supreme amount of confidence. He is my wide receiver number 3 on the week. Devontae Adams has been on a rampage like Michael Myers in Haddonfield back in the day. 6 receptions on 8 targets for 77 yards and a touchdown last week with 3 straight top 12 showings and 6 total touchdowns over that stretch. Against the Seahawks, Seahawks, I expect him to keep up his upper echelon play as a low-end wide receiver number 1. For the rest of the wide receivers in this game, Jordan Whittington is banged up with a back injury and played last week anyways. With Adams and Puka in the lineup, this is not a guy that you should be considering putting in your lineup or even just holding on your bench. I'm Rashid Shaheed debut was ice cold as the wide receiver 68 in his first game as a Seahawk with 1 reception on 1 target for 3 yards. Now, this was a weird game script and maybe things go more back his way this week, but I want to see a real game here before I'm actually confident enough to start him. Cooper Kupp was 2 of 2 for 74 yards last week. He hasn't gotten more than 3 targets in 3 straight games now. I would leave him on my bench, especially with Shaheed now in town. Now we got the 49ers at the Arizona Cardinals. Now, we'll talk about the Arizona Cardinals first because they are the team with the most news surrounding them. Michael Wilson is a start, which I know might sound crazy, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is out with appendicitis this week. He had to have surgery and will be out at least one more game, which to me sounds like it could be 2. But again, I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins. I won't say that definitively, but not great, right? In the 12th best matchup for wide receivers against the 49ers, this probably would have been a great game for Marvin Harrison Jr. You have to push up Wilson, 7 targets last week, and I think he should see a similar amount this week. Not a guy I overwhelmingly trust, as Trey McBride could just get 15 targets here, and they have other options, so he's more of a break glass in case of emergency wide receiver 4, but my confidence is definitely a bit higher without Zay Jones now. For the other Cardinals, I think without Marv, Short King, Greg Dortch, may end up as the guy you want in Arizona. But again, I don't trust him as much as I would trust Wilson. And I don't trust Sime Fehoko either, so those guys would be sits as well. For the 49ers, Juwan Jennings may low-key be back-to-back games with 14-plus point showings last week against the Rams as the 49ers kind of just got spit roasted for the entire game, right? The Rams were just in the lead the whole time. It really never felt like the 49ers even stood a fucking chance. Still, Juwan Jennings, 6 of 9 for 71 yards and a touchdown. Back-to-back games with a touchdown against a Cardinals defense that allows the 16th most points to wide receivers. You can throw him out there as a high-end wide receiver 3. Kind of feels like Ricky Pearsall will play this week, but nothing in life is a guarantee besides the Jets sucking ass at playing football. We haven't seen Bro play in 5 straight games. When healthy, 2 solid games this season and 2 not so hot games. When playing, you have to at least rank him as a start in that same range as Juwan Jennings. Kendrick Bourne is now sleeping with the fishes if Pearsall returns, so he would be a drop a 50 bag. Shout out to Drake. Now we move to the Baltimore Ravens at the Cleveland Browns. While Zay Flowers has yet to truly explode in the 2 games since Lamar Jackson returned, I can feel it coming, like that weekend song. Back-to-back games as a top 32 wide receiver. Last week as the wide receiver 31 in Minnesota. 4 receptions on 6 targets for 75 yards and 1 rush for 6 yards. Earlier on the season when they played the Browns, he was 7 of 11 for 75 yards and 1 rush for 4 yards. In the 18th best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis, fire up Zay Flowers as a mid-range wide receiver 2. And if Rashad Bateman does end up missing with the high ankle sprain, it would move Flowers up ever so slightly. Rashad Master Bateman, if he plays through the high ankle sprain, it would definitely be insane to play a guy with the involvement that he's had this season, with the skill set that he has, with a high ankle sprain. That would just completely deter him from being useful at all. If he doesn't play, that pushes up D-Hop, but even with D-Hop, he's just a guy that I'd be shocked if he got more than 2 targets, so I would leave him on my waivers. Now, I would sooner sign up to walk on a mile-long path of broken glass over putting Jerry fucking Jeudy in my lineup. I know some people call me a fool for listing him as a sit last week as he hit the Jets with the 619 Rey Mysterio in MetLife as the wide receiver 11 with 6 receptions on 12 targets for 78 yards and a touchdown. Round of applause for him, right? But this is a case of a broken clock is right twice a day. Just because you magically, for some reason, conjure up a good game and you, for some reason, galaxy brained yourself into playing him, doesn't mean you should do it again. Before last week, 7 straight games with fewer than 10 PPR points, with 4 games under 4 points in that stretch. I get the matchup here on paper is great up against the Ravens, who allow the 5th most points to wide receivers on a per game basis, but I am not. It's a trap. Shout out to Admiral Akbar. I'm not falling for the trap. Clear sit for me. Cedric Tillman is back, which is nice to see, but as of right now, playing any Browns wide receiver would be silly. 2 receptions on 4 targets for 11 yards last week. Leave him on waivers with Dylan Gabriel under center. Isaiah Bond also belongs on the waivers. Now we got the Kansas City Chiefs at the Denver Broncos in Mile High. Now, Rashee Rice has been a top 12 wide receiver in all 3 games he has started with the Chiefs since coming back from the suspension. 4 total touchdowns over that stretch, and there are no signs of the Rashee Rice train having an ounce of breaks. I get the Broncos are the worst matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis, but without Patrick Surtain, I expect Rashee Rice to put belt to ass in this game as a must-start top 8 wide receiver. Xavier Worthy has received 7 targets in back-to-back weeks prior to the bye week. While his value has definitely taken an uppercut from prime Mike Tyson with Rashee Rice back on the squad, his upside is still on the moon. He also seems to have at least a decent enough floor to not completely shaft you if things don't go his way this week. It is a bad matchup, so he's in that YOLO wide receiver 4 break glass in case of emergency range. For Hollywood Brown, every few games he is going to score and people will be like, dang, I wish I started him. And then they push him into the lineup the next week just for him to get like 4 or 6 fantasy points. He is a clear sit for me, playing under 45% of the snaps in 3 straight games since Rashee has been back. For the Denver Broncos, Courtland Sutton has been struggling big time. Gotta go big time. Shout out to the big time rush over the last 3 games. He went from a guy that felt like a nice bubble wrapping around your fantasy team, top 20 wide receiver weekly in your lineup, to where he is now, and things are looking a lot different. Wide receiver 36 in week number 8 in a juicy matchup up against Dallas. Wide receiver 36 in Houston, a much worse matchup, a game where you could have seen that coming. And last week, the offense fell flat on its face up against the Las Vegas Raiders as the wide receiver 54. I'm not counting out Courtland Sutton by any means, but when you're in a rough matchup like this up against the Chiefs, who are the 3rd worst matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis, I definitely think we will have to wait till the post-bye week, that's a week number 12, for Sutton to come alive again, meaning he may be a guy that is a nice buy low candidate if he shits the bed this week, because better matchups are ahead. He's still the wide receiver 1 in my opinion. He is a mid-range wide receiver 3 for me, since I do believe his floor is much higher than what we saw last week. Troy Franklin, the turtle, with Courtland Sutton stumbling and bumbling. Troy Franklin has risen to the top of this offense. We have seen a wide receiver 1 finish against Dallas in week 3, wide receiver 48 in Houston, which again, we expected a bad game, and then the wide receiver 23 with 5 receptions on 9 targets for 40 yards and a touchdown in the only touchdown of that game up against the Raiders. I'm still a big believer in Sutton, but Franklin could surpass him. I don't think he has yet, but he may. In terms of a spot here, though, this is a bad matchup. He is a break glass in case of emergency wide receiver 4 like Worthy. Mims missed back-to-back games with a concussion. He did seem to progress well last week, but the game was on a Thursday, so that does you in. If you have a slight chance of playing, if the game's on Sunday, if the game's on Thursday, you're not going to play. Whether he plays or not, though, just should not concern you. You're not playing the wide receiver 3 on Denver if it's Pat Bryant against the Chiefs' pass defense. Now we got the Detroit Lions at the Philadelphia Eagles on, because you waited all day for Sunday night. The Detroit Lions at the Philadelphia Eagles. Amon-Ra St. Brown was the wide receiver 19 last week in Washington with 5 receptions on 8 targets for 58 yards. With Jameson Williams exploding like he was in an FPS Russia video, Amon-Ra St. Brown was still incredibly solid. While the Eagles matchup isn't a mouth-watering one, the 22nd best matchup for wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown is a very, very, very safe bet weekly. He will continue to be ranked as a top 5 option. He's a top 5 wide receiver for me on the week. With the play calling now in the hands of Dan Campbell, Jameson Williams got turned up a notch. 6 receptions on 7 targets for 119 yards and a touchdown. Now he has scored a touchdown in back-to-back games coming out of the bye week. I think it is important to understand that a 1-game sample size, though, shouldn't completely swing the pendulum 100% in the direction of Jameson Williams. Now, obviously, my belief in him is way higher now. But I think getting overzealous and just banging the drum aggressively, he's a must-start top 24 wide receiver, is a overreaction in a matchup like this up against the Eagles. I do think he can finish that way, but I could also see things reverting back to how they were, where he gets like 3 or 4 targets. Now, in a game that I think should be close, he's a high-end wide receiver 3 for me on the week. But again, I don't want to hype him up too much because we've seen Jameson Williams be very disappointing in the past. Isaac Tesla still can't seem to even get a guaranteed target, so there's no need to even discuss him, even in a fun game. Now, for the Eagles, A.J. Brown. Man, oh man, A.J. Brown. Some of these guys just should not be going onto streams and saying shit. A.J. Brown seemed so pissed off on this live stream. I was seeing clips about he wasn't the guy streaming. It was someone else. I've never seen the other guy, not to shit on whoever that was. But A.J. Brown's talking about how, like, look at his stats at Madden. This is the most fun he's had playing football in weeks. It's like, oh my gosh, things are bad. Does that lead to, A.J. Brown lashing out? Does that lead to A.J. Brown getting more targets? We'll see. This season has been, A.J. Brown giveth and he taketh. Last week, we got taken to the cleaners. And we just got taken to the cleaners, not only for being stupid enough to watch the whole game, hoping something would happen, and if you played A.J. Brown, you got face fucked. In Green Bay, A.J.B. had 2 receptions on 3 targets for 13 yards and a certified snooze fest as the wide receiver 69. Very nice. I like. A.J. Brown is one of the most boom or bust wide receivers in all of fantasy football. Prior to last week, back-to-back top 19 showings, we have seen more bad than good, though, this season, and you might even say things have gotten ugly. But at the end of the day, if you drafted the guy, you aren't sending him in the 8th best matchup for wide receivers in a spot where I think the Eagles could be trailing, have to pass more. He's a mid-range wide receiver 2 for me, but again, things don't feel great if you have him in your lineup. Devontae Smith is in the exact same boat as A.J. Brown. Both guys are immensely talented, but due to how this offense functions, one or both of these guys could individually take your team out from the inside. Devontae, unlike Brown, though, was eaten last week. 4 receptions on 7 targets for 69 yards and a touchdown. In a great matchup here up against the Lions, while a bust may definitely be around the corner, you aren't going to sit him. He is a mid-range wide receiver, too. And if you wanted to rank him ahead of A.J. Brown, I will not judge you, but maybe him lashing out, A.J. Brown saying all this stuff, might lead to more targets this week. Jahan Dotson hasn't seen more than 3 targets a single time this season, even in an enticing matchup here. With A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith healthy, he belongs on the waivers. Final game here, we got the Dallas Cowboys at the Las Vegas Raiders on Monday Night Football. CeeDee Lamb has been a very consistent wide receiver when healthy this season. While he hasn't really lived up to my expectations this year, or the expectations of anyone who drafted him, he has still been a top 22 wide receiver in all games that he actually finished. The fact that he missed 3 games, basically 4, definitely hurts you because of where you drafted him. But hey, at the end of the day, you're playing CeeDee Lamb as a must-start wide receiver every single week. 8+ targets in all games completed this season. Coming out the bye, I expect magic in the 6th best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. I believe the offense will also look much improved coming out the bye week. Lock in CeeDee Lamb as a must-start top 5 option. George Pickens' value has definitely been suppressed with CeeDee Lamb back on the field, but ultimately, this crazy upside is still very evident with him. And in a matchup up against the Raiders, who are such a great matchup for wide receivers, this is the kind of game that I think he could take full advantage of. I got him as a high-end wide receiver number 2. Ryan Flournoy found the end zone prior to the bye, going 2 for 2 for 12 yards and a touchdown. I very much believe in the ability of Flournoy, but again, it's another scenario where it's like you have Pickens, you have CeeDee Lamb, you're just not in the fold enough. You're not going to get enough targets for me to actually justify starting you. Trey Tucker, with Jacoby Myers now in Duval with the Jaguars. Trey Tucker is now the wide receiver 1 on this team in theory, and that's just a game theory. Now, last week, he was out-targeted by Tyler Lockett in my pocket. Skirt! Tyler Lockett doesn't move the needle at all for me. In that game against the Broncos in Denver, Tucker was 2 of 3 for 28 yards with 1 rush for 7 yards. In the best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis this week, strictly based on matchup alone. He is a YOLO break class in case of emergency wide receiver number 4. So while I do love this spot, though, the guy hasn't scored over 9 points in 3 straight games. So the floor is definitely lava. Now, in the past, Jacoby Myers, he was very involved, but now Jacoby Myers is gone, so Now we're going to be seeing more Tyler Lockett. The problem with Lockett is he is the least sexy play of all time. You're playing a wide receiver 2 that is old as dirt with a quarterback that no one fucking trusts. And Lockett makes business decisions to fall instead of taking hits. Instead of maybe gaining an extra 5 yards, maybe trying to juke someone out of their shoes, make someone miss, he just falls over because he's old as fuck and he doesn't want to get hurt. So while he might be a safe floor of 9 PPR points, and last week, he was 5 receptions on 6 targets for 44 yards. With the upside being so low, why would you ever actually start him? You don't win your fantasy league by playing a guy like Tyler Lockett. I get it. Maybe the 9 points are good enough to win you your fucking league, okay? I get it. To win that week. But, like, we talk about Khalil Shakir, right? He's not the most upside guy, but we've seen Khalil Shakir smash, right? Tyler Lockett, as an unk, isn't going to fucking score 20 fantasy points, so I'm not starting him. Dante Thornton has been getting a ton of snaps, 60+% back-to-back games, but with just 1 reception over the last 2 games, he belongs on your waivers. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you didn't have been enjoying, make sure guys hit that subscribe button down below, like and donate some money, and leave a like on today's video to help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Check out the Patreon link in the video description to get my rankings and get any of your questions answered for the week. I love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great one. Check out one of the videos on the screen if you haven't seen them already. As always, good boy!